Joining us now on the phone is John Bolton, who served as national security advisor in the first Trump administration. He owned the Venezuela portfolio as part of his work in the NSC and was a leading proponent of regime change. Ambassador Bolton, thank you so much for joining us this morning. We have a lot of questions for you as someone who probably post-administration has the most insight into what regime change in Venezuela might look like. Why do you think Trump ultimately took action against Maduro now and didn't in 2019? And with all this conversation about the day after plans, what do you think needs to happen now?
Well, I don't know what persuaded him. I think advocacy by Marco Rubio was probably quite important. I wish we had done this back in 2019, but better late than never. I think it's exactly the right thing to do for a number of reasons relating directly to American national security interests to remove Maduro. But it's only the first step, and I'm not sure, we may find out at 11 whether Trump will take the next steps. The fact is, removing Maduro is not removing the regime. All the evidence we have to date, and it is limited, is that the regime is continuing to function. And one key factor here is that there are a number of foreign powers, Russia, Cuba, China, and Iran, that very much want that regime to stay. I mean, that is the national security threat. The activities and the interests of those countries in Venezuela is what justifies overthrowing the regime. And we don't know whether they will stick with it or not. But right now, it's still in place. So a lot of questions yet to be answered.
Ambassador Bolton, I want to drill down on the national security interest that you're talking about. What was Maduro, what was the government of Venezuela doing that was endangering the national security of the United States?
Well, specifically for quite some time, there's been a heavy Cuban and Russian presence there. The Russians see Venezuela as a kind of forward operating base in the Western Hemisphere that's much better for them than Cuba because it's not 90 miles away. It's across the Caribbean, obviously. The Cubans have seen the Maduro regime as critical to keeping their regime in power through the transfer of subsidized oil shipments and other kinds of cooperation. So the Cubans very much feel that if Maduro's regime falls, the post-Castro regime in Cuba might fall too, which would be an excellent idea. I think their fears are correct. The Chinese, who seek access to petroleum anywhere in the world, have the capacity to rebuild the deteriorated oil infrastructure in Venezuela, make Venezuela again a much more effective oil producer that the Chinese would take full benefit of. And the Iranians, for a long time, their embassy in Caracas has been their largest embassy in the world. They use it to coordinate Hezbollah activities in the Western Hemisphere, to launder money that they've obtained through their oil sales in violation of our sanctions, and also just to keep an eye on the very, very extensive Venezuelan reserves of uranium.
Really quickly, I heard you mention Russia, Cuba, China, Iran, all of those countries kind of their partnership with Venezuela being the threat. But what is Venezuela itself doing to endanger the national security of the United States and the American people?
Well, the regime of Maduro, the Chavez-Maduro regime, really has allowed all this to happen. And as a base of operations just for Hezbollah alone in the Western Hemisphere, that endangers regional stability that obviously affects us. There is one other small point here, and that's the fate of the Venezuelan people who have suffered under this dictatorship, the loss of political freedom, the terrible economic deprivation they're suffering. If we had acted this way 6 years ago, Venezuela might be a much better country for its people. The people might actually be governing there today, and they have that prospect if Trump's willing to follow through. We just don't know the answer to that yet.
Ambassador, I want to bring up something you said a moment ago where you said removing Maduro is not removing the regime. So is it possible for the administration to claim success if the regime is still in place?
Well, Trump always claims success no matter what happened. I am worried that we could see the same phenomenon we saw after the Israeli-U.S. attacks on Iran's nuclear weapons program, where the attacks were successful as far as they went, but didn't go far enough. We can see in Iran now demonstrators in the streets destabilizing the government, quite the opposite of what people predicted if we attacked Iran. So I think it's legitimate to say now that the people of Venezuela are, and certainly the opposition, are very vulnerable if Trump doesn't follow through.
Would you say that narco-terrorism, what this current administration has been alleging as wrongdoing by Maduro, is the primary interest in ousting him for the American people, as Trump has consistently alleged, or is it those other interests that you outlined to Eugene, countering China,
Well, I think it's
Iran,
the other interest.
Russia?
I think the narco terrorism argument is a legitimate concern in some respects, particularly for operations in Colombia next door. The drug trafficking Venezuela does is mostly through Venezuela, not emanating from that country, and most of it goes to Europe. So we'll see what the evidence is. It goes back, I think, though, if you compare it to the overthrow of Manuel Noriega 35 years to the day before the overthrow of Maduro. Noriega was brought up on drug charges, but our concern in the George H.W. Bush administration was that violence had been threatened and perpetrated against Americans. We were worried about the Panama Canal. There were other more significant issues involved.
Mm-hmm. Ambassador, what we've seen from European leaders is them continuing to say something along the lines of any solution here must respect international law and the UN Charter. And the question to you is, what do you think about the international law implications of this? Because at the end of the day, we have been, without congressional approval and oversight, bombing boats from Venezuela. The CIA bombed this dock about a week ago, and now we've gone into their country. It's seemingly attacked based on the videos that we're seeing, and grabbed their leader without a day after plan that we have seen so far. That seems to have a lot of international law implications here.
Well, I think it's fully justified. Look, in 2018, 2019, the Venezuelan National Assembly declared the presidency vacant because Maduro had cheated in the 2018 elections. We supported Juan Guaido, whom we considered the legitimate interim president, and therefore it wasn't violating any conceivable provision of international law to overthrow a usurper who had illegitimately stolen the election. Now, fast forward to 2024, and Maduro steals the second election. So he's no more the legitimate ruler of Venezuela than you or I are.